The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
Then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
The fighting is over, except about whether or not the final blow was effective or not. What the latest intelligence says about the state of Iran's nuclear capabilities. Plus, Title IX decision. The investigation is over into biological males participating in female sports in California. What the Education Department found and what they say California needs to do or else. And then a shift in Democratic politics to the left. What Zohran Mamdani's monumental victory in New York City means for Democrats across the country in elections moving forward. This is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Dee Gatton. We are glad you're here with us. And within the hour, President Donald Trump will return after a quick 2 days at the NATO summit in the Netherlands. It was a successful trip for the president. He affirmed the U.S. stands with the defense clause of Article 5 and also secured agreement from our NATO allies to increase their spending, defense spending, for the alliance.
Allies have agreed to invest 5% of GDP in defense. This is a significant commitment in response to significant threats to our security.
This is a significant increase in spending, as previous core defense spending was at a 2% benchmark. But much of the attention at the summit was, of course, on Iran and the leaked intelligence memo that suggested that maybe the United States' strike over the weekend was not as successful as the president suggested.
The document said it could be very severe damage, but they didn't take that. They said it could be limited or it could be very severe. They really didn't know, other than to say it could be limited or it could be very, very severe.
U.S. intelligence officials are still working to determine the exact extent of the damage done. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar is live in Washington with the latest.
President Trump in a war of words over how effective U.S. strikes were in taking out Iran's underground nuclear facilities.
The site is obliterated, and we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out.
Information in an early report by the Pentagon's intelligence arm was leaked to several media outlets, saying the U.S. strikes did not entirely destroy Iran's nuclear facilities and only set the country's nuclear program back by a matter of months, contradicting recent claims by the president and top administration officials. The president and his defense secretary do acknowledge the report exists.
When you actually look at the report, by the way, it was a top secret report, it was preliminary, it was low confidence. All right, so this isn't, you make assessments based on what you know.
They said it could be very devastating, very serious.
Moderate to severe, and we believe far more likely severe and obliterated.
A select few members of Congress have been briefed on the report, including Democratic House Intelligence Committee member Jason Crow. Without revealing classified information, he suggests Iran's facilities may have been built like America's Cold War-era Cheyenne Mountain complex.
Over 60 years ago, we built a nuclear-proof facility. Do you think that technology exists today? Do you think people can still do that? Of course they can.
These before and after satellite pictures show at the surface damage inflicted by America's bunker buster bombs and Tomahawk missiles. The White House leaning on statements from Israeli officials saying the strikes set Iran's nuclear program back by years. Iran only revealing this.
Yes, our nuclear installations have been badly damaged, that's for sure.
Now, complicating efforts to get a full assessment of Iran's nuclear program, of the state of it. On Wednesday, Iran's parliament advanced a bill to suspend cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Dee Dee, they had been trying to resume inspections of Iran's nuclear facilities.
Yeah, that's another layer, another key layer of the confusion among some right now, Atra. Do we know about when members of Congress will be briefed? I know it was postponed earlier.
Right. They were supposed to be briefed yesterday by intelligence officials, but at the last minute, it got pushed back to later in the week. And the official reason was scheduling, but Republican leadership said it shouldn't be read into anything other than that. But Democrats, like Jason Crow, who've been demanding more transparency and information on the situation with Iran, suspect the administration is concealing key intelligence. And Didi, I should note, at this hour, CNN and some other outlets are reporting that the Trump administration is starting to limit some of the intelligence that they plan to share with Congress.
Keep us posted on that major development. Live from Washington, D.C., Atra El-Nashar, thank you. The Congressional Progressive Caucus held a news conference outside of the Capitol today, calling on Congress to pass the updated War Powers Resolution that would curtail some of the president's powers as commander-in-chief. Now, this new legislation specifically states that President Trump would not be allowed to use any U.S. military force against Iran unless explicitly authorized by Congress.
The War Powers Resolution that Massey and I introduced is still ripening. We expect that it will ripen by the middle of July, and then we hope that it will get a vote. We expect that it will get a vote.
House Speaker Mike Johnson has a different point of view. He believes the president's military actions in Iran were completely constitutional, and also says the War Powers Act and subsequent resolutions are not constitutional because they violate the president's power as commander-in-chief in Article 2. Also on Capitol Hill today, House committees on administration, judiciary, and oversight and government reform have subpoenaed 2 officials from the Democratic fundraising group ActBlue to answer questions under oath about claims of widespread donation fraud. Both had notified Congress this spring they would voluntarily testify, but withdrew that consent after Attorney General Pam Bondi opened a criminal investigation into the organization. Their testimony will now be compulsory. The FBI plans to hand over evidence to Congress that shows the former director, Christopher Wray, shut down an investigation that showed China was involved in election interference in the 2020 election. This is according to the Daily Mail. In a statement, current FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino wrote, based on our continued review and production of FBI documents related to the CCP's plot to interfere in the 2020 U.S. presidential election, previous FBI leadership chose to play politics and withhold key information from the American people, exposing the weaponization of law enforcement for political purposes during the height of the 2020 election season. Check out this video out of Las Vegas. An American Airlines flight headed to North Carolina had to turn around for an emergency landing after smoke and apparent flames, or at least sparks, are seen coming out of one of the engines. We've got the video up in full for you here. The plane made a safe landing with no injuries reported, thankfully. American Airlines says there was no evidence of a fire in the engine, but did say the plane suffered a mechanical issue. Witnesses on the ground say they heard booming noises sounding like fireworks. New Jersey Congresswoman LaMonica McIver pleaded not guilty to assaulting and interfering with ICE officers outside a New Jersey detention center last month. She says she was doing her job of oversight and the indictments are political. Her trial is set for November 10th. She faces up to 8 years in prison if convicted, if sentenced concurrently on all charges. Also, Kilmar Abrego Garcia will remain in custody, we have learned, for now, as his defense attorneys and government lawyers continue to argue over whether he'll be deported again if released. Garcia, an El Salvadorian national deported to El Salvador this spring, faces human trafficking charges in Tennessee. Last week, a judge ordered him to be released because he isn't said to be a threat to the community, something the DOJ disagrees with. The Trump administration is planning to speed up the deportation of possibly hundreds of thousands of migrants, according to CNN, citing 2 sources with knowledge of the matter. People who came here illegally and then applied for asylum, they would have their asylum claims dismissed. Then they would be deported without a hearing before an immigration judge. A state prison in California is set to reopen as a federal detention center, which it originally was. The prison company, CoreCivic, says it reached a preliminary agreement with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Some Some, including the Dolores Huerta Foundation, oppose this move. The mayor of California City says feedback has been mostly positive, but he wants the city to be involved.
I have requested, and even on a tour with the individuals who run the facility, Core Civic, that the city has some oversight. You know, if and when it does open, that we have the ability to, make sure that the conditions are humane.
Core Civic said it's negotiating a longer-term deal with ICE. New developments tonight that'll have major impacts to Michigan's sex offender registry. The federal judge pausing a deadline that would have removed nearly 3/4 of the names off the list. Late last year, a federal judge found parts of the Michigan Sex Offender Registry Act law to be unconstitutional. In a lawsuit filed by the ACLU of Michigan in 2022 on behalf of 10 convicted sex offenders, the ruling essentially says these convicts can't be held responsible for rules created after their convictions.
Those individuals would be entitled to a hearing where the prosecutor would have to show that the crime or the conviction from the other state is similar enough to a crime in Michigan that it's fair to count it and make the person subject to the registration.
Just yesterday, the state Senate passed a bill to change some requirements to get in line with this ruling. This bill still has to make its way through the House and be signed by Governor Whitmer. The state of California is in violation of Title IX by allowing biological men to play in women's school sports. That is the conclusion of the Department of Education's investigation. California's Department of Education has now been sent recommendations to follow to come into compliance. They have 10 days to enact these recommendations, or the U.S. Education Department will refer the case to the Department of Justice. The CDC's new vaccine advisory panel is meeting for the first time since Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. replaced its 17 members with 8 new ones, including some who have criticized vaccines. The panel said it would study the cumulative impact of the childhood vaccine schedule and reconsider guidance for the hepatitis B shot and vaccines that have not been reviewed in over 7 years. The meeting continues tomorrow. Rapper and music mogul Sean Diddy Combs is no longer facing kidnapping and attempted arson charges. The prosecution also dropped one of the indictments of aiding and abetting in sex trafficking. Combs still faces other counts of trafficking as well as racketeering conspiracy. The state said they amended the indictment to help streamline the judge's instructions for the jury. Closing arguments are set for tomorrow. Jury deliberations are expected to begin by Friday. Combs faces life in prison if convicted. He has pleaded not guilty. Coming up, the biggest piece of advice one expert has to avoid heat-related illness during these extreme conditions. Also, the big changes in which political parties Americans are flocking to over the past 25 years. Then, the new way one major city is trying to hold graffiti taggers accountable for their vandalism. We'll be right back. As we come back on the air, Americans experiencing suffocating heat. Over 115 million Americans are under heat alerts as a cross-country heat wave persists. The most dangerous conditions, they start in the central U.S. from Illinois all the way down to Louisiana, and they stretch all the way to the East Coast. Now, extreme temperatures will continue in the Mid-Atlantic region through tomorrow, as well as in the Ohio Valley region through Friday. Air conditioning units are getting a workout right now. An HVAC expert in North Carolina says his company's call volume for repairs and installations is up around 150%. He stresses the importance of regular maintenance.
One single advice I can give to everyone is make sure you're changing your filters regularly. That filter, if it's not replaced regularly, it really chokes the whole system down. So it's not producing the efficiency, the cool air, or the heat, depending on the season.
Democrats are likely to face new questions about the direction of the party after a Democratic Socialist candidate scored a big win in New York City's mayoral primary. The National News Desk, Matt Gelka, reports from Washington.
33-year-old Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani got a concession from establishment candidate and well-known former Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York City's Democratic mayoral primary.
I will fight for a city that works for you, that is affordable for you, that is safe for you.
The primary was one of the first big Democratic tests since Donald Trump's sweeping win last November. Mamdani used a grassroots and social media-driven campaign with progressive ideas like free city services, rent stabilization, and subsidized groceries to appeal to New Yorkers feeling priced out. His supporters say Cuomo's Democratic brand of big-money donors and high-profile endorsements doesn't resonate anymore.
Andrew Cuomo is in the past.
It remains to be seen if Mamdani's stances are the direction of the party searching for an identity. Critics have painted him as anti-Israel and called him anti-Semitic and pointed to him as a defund the police advocate. Other Democrats will likely have to answer for the policies. Democratic strategist Ashwani Jain says the party can learn from what Republicans and Trump have been doing for the past 10 years.
Ultimately, the strategy of being very bold and aggressive worked very well for them. And I think Democrats need to play an equally bold, but again, I would argue progressive vision that's rooted in equity and progress.
Michigan Democrat Debbie Dingell says members of her party can take notes on strategy.
Affordability is what we need to be talking about. Some people are going to try to pin it up. He's a communist. What he is talking to people about what they care about.
Meanwhile, Republicans are hopeful to make Mamdani the extreme new face of the Democratic Party. The National Republican Congressional Committee called him the anti-Semitic socialist radical while trying to tie him to other Democrats. Mamdani's victory in November is far from guaranteed. Incumbent Mayor Eric Adams won as a Democrat but is now running as an independent, and Cuomo hasn't ruled out running under a different label. Plus, the GOP has its own candidate. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Across the country, new voter registration data from Ballotpedia shows fewer people are registering as Democrats and more are independents. In 2000, 44% of voters registered as Democrats, 33% of voters registered as Republican, and 23% registered as independent or third party. Now, in 2025, the percentage of registered Democrats has dropped to 37%. The percentage of registered Republicans stayed about the same, and the percentage of independents has jumped nearly 10 points to 32%. Pope Leo XIV reaffirmed the need for Catholic priests to remain celibate today as he addressed roughly 400 bishops at the Vatican. The Pope said priests must remain detached from the pursuit of wealth and from forms of favoritism based on money or power. He also urged the bishops to take firm and decisive action to address sex abusers. The new Pope, the first American-born pontiff, succeeded the late Pope Francis last month. Mixed results are shown in a new study on Americans' heart health published in the Journal of the American Heart Association. Overall, heart disease deaths in adults over 24 dropped 66% from 1970 to 2022. Heart attack deaths fell by almost 90%, but deaths from all other types of heart disease rose 81%. Heart disease is the most common cause of death globally. And when it comes to heart health, a free training tool to help save lives could be coming to a grocery store, airport, or an airport near you. Medical reporter Liz Bonus explains.
Hey there, everybody. The American Heart Association urging all of us to learn what they refer to as bystander CPR, and they are trying to make it easier for all of us to learn this important medical intervention.
It's all because, while you may not think of Ohio's Findlay Market as the typical place where someone might collapse from a heart-stopping event, but
we wanted to be able to meet people where they are, and this is such a high-trafficked area at Findlay Market that it just made so much sense.
What made sense, the American Heart Association's Rachel McCarthy told us, was to put this CPR kiosk here where you shop, because 1 in 5 cardiac arrests occur in public places.
We have a statistic that right now 65% of Americans aren't confident to perform CPR, and that's led to a dismal 10% chance of survival rate from a cardiac arrest. So we want everyone across the country to feel empowered to perform CPR.
So from airports and convention centers to fitness centers and food markets, these CPR kiosks are quietly being placed in hopes you'll pause and press on a mock chest and learn how to do hands-only CPR.
Trained, but I believe the placement is right here.
The hope is that by the sheer odds of the number of people who might pass by in a busy place,
we're just happy to be a small part of helping our community stay healthier.
The CPR kiosks will help save lives. They're designed to be sort of a one-stop shopping for this life-saving intervention.
It will show you videos of how to do CPR, walk you through what a possible scenario could look like, and then it will actually score you on doing the hands-only chest compressions.
And if you are keeping score, the American Heart Association reminds us performing hands-only CPR within about 6 minutes of a heart attack not only ups survival odds, it lowers the odds of damage to the brain from a loss of oxygen.
Now, the top reasons we don't often do bystander CPR, according to one survey: we don't know how, we fear legal problems afterward, or we simply think that somebody else will step in. So we suggested you weigh the benefit versus the risk. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
Coming up, what Texas's new school library book law does and why some parents are upset. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in Texas, where a parent reacts to a new school library book law.
Kevin Jackson has always encouraged his 2 daughters to read.
They just get to see, different perspectives of what's going on in American history and world history, and just different viewpoints.
Both are now in high school, and he calls Senate Bill 13 an attack on his right as a parent to monitor what his daughters are reading.
I'd ask my daughters, oh, okay, you're interested in this book, and we can talk about it and everything like that.
Signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott last Friday, it gives school boards the final say on what books are allowed in its libraries instead of librarians. State Senator Angela Paxton authored the bill.
No child should pick up a book in their school library of all places.
and see sexually explicit, harmful material within its pages.
Graffiti taggers have left their mark on seemingly every corner of Seattle, and it's costing the city millions to try to clean up.
Graffiti is the single most common complaint in my inbox.
The city council will soon vote on whether to allow City Attorney Ann Davison to sue graffiti taggers for the cost of their damage.
And we would be focusing on the most prolific taggers that we have been able to identify, so that's not a large number. They do a lot of damage.
Aaron Goodman from the Soto Business Improvement Area says repeat tagging costs small businesses a fortune.
There is this mindset of it's somebody else's problem. And so what I like about this ordinance is like, no, we're going to show you that this is actually going to be your problem.
Burnt land everywhere you look as you enter Rowena. Neighborhoods with homes crumbled to the ground. That devastation allegedly sparked from these train tracks.
We think that the train is what caused it, and there are a number of different potential ways.
Gerald Singleton represents one of the 56 families that lost their homes in the fire. They filed a lawsuit against Union Pacific, claiming, quote, the risk of wildfire in the Columbia River Gorge area was well known to defendants prior to the start of the Rowena fire. I reached out to Union Pacific about these claims. They wouldn't go on camera, but did send me over this statement saying, quote, Union Pacific has found no evidence to date that our train caused the Rowena fire.
Coming up next, the charity mission that's motivating an Ohio man to run for 24 hours straight. We'll have his story coming up. A recent college grad from Ohio plans to run for 24 hours straight for a good cause, but the time, let that sink in. Andrew Whitson said with each mile he runs, he'll raise money for a nonprofit that helps erase medical debt. He said he will try to run 100 miles. He said he's been running around 60 miles a week for the past few weeks and plans to increase that. We wish him the best of luck. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tonight with the top stories at 10.